as usual, I like to start with the eyes, but for this case, I'm starting out with the beak because why not? Let's be a little bit different. And I usually like to draw left to right, so that's probably why I chose to do the beak. Going a little bit fast here, but I did start out with the yellow. I really want a vibrant yellow, and I do apologize for the focus here. I'm still trying to get a handle on how to get that focus really good on the camera. But yeah, so get the beak nice and bright and yellow. And of course, add some shading in there. That's really important, especially for the eyes here. You want to make sure you have a really good highlight feature. Even if it's really small, you still want to make sure you incorporate that, or your eye will look super flat. The rest of this head here, so there's going to be a variety of colors. I'm using a little bit of some cold blues, like a cold gray color, some sepia colors, as well as some raw umber colors. So the raw umber is kind of like a nice earth tone green. I have mentioned it before in some of my previous videos, but it is just a lovely, gorgeous color to use in every single animal because it really does bring out more of those natural reflective colors and tones based off of the environment that that animal is living in. And then, of course, you want to use a light ivory color or just a light beige color to kind of incorporate some highlighted features. So you can see that there's a little bit of highlight above the eye and below the eye. Just pay attention to where you see the highlights, the midtones, and the low lights, which is pretty much just shading itself. And then once you have a good foundation going, then you can apply darker colors like black over top of the colors, and it won't come off as a flat black color. It'll be a little bit different and have a little bit more of an enhanced look because there's other colors that are being in. When it comes to the wings, you have to be super patient because there's so much detail that's involved. But just trust the process and have fun with it because that's really what matters most, is not worrying about the outcome of it, but just focusing and enjoying the moment in the process itself and doing the best you can in that moment itself. So the first couple of layers, I do use a little bit of a more vibrant blue color because I really want some of that blue, the blue tones to pop. Now, to train your mind to see some of these colors that you don't normally see or would think about, you definitely have to look at the picture and see, okay, what colors am I seeing underneath the basic colors, underneath those top colors that are showing. So there's a lot of blue, and then there's a little bit of pink that's involved too. So I'm using a little bit of that very pale pink, which you can just use white if you want, if you don't have a pale pink. But it adds a nice contrast between the warm tones and the cool tones. So focusing on this section here with the details of the wings, I'm just starting out using a dark sepia color, and I'm not too worried about the details themselves. I'm just trying to get a basic structure. That way I can kind of understand the proportions that are happening here. Because proportions, yes, they do matter a lot, but don't heavily focus on every single detail of all the proportions, all the sizing itself, because once you do focus too much on the details, you're going to end up losing sight of the whole thing overall. Now, if you saw me just use that paintbrush, it's mineral spirit oil that I used, and what that does is it helps to blend those colors together. So after first few layers, you can use that, and as it starts to kind of soak in, you can start to build more layers on top. So I'd probably give it like a few minutes to be able to soak in before applying more layers. And what it also helps to make more of a saturated look. So when you apply those colors on top, it's darker, it's more saturated, it's more detailed. It's just a really great tool that I like to use. So I use strictly colored pencils, but the only exception is the mineral spirit oil. I cannot live without it, mostly because I've developed carpal tunnel over time. because I pressed down too hard. So using the mineral spirit oil alleviates the pressure and the amount of time that I'm using color pencils themselves. So it really just ultimately helps me not have hand cramps by the end of the day. And so for this robin here, you really just think about the basic colors. Okay, so there's a lot of grays, and then in the belly, there's a lot of reds and orange. But you'd be surprised there are a variety of colors. So I'm using a blue-gray as the midtones, and then I'm using some darker grays as well as some just browns too. So like a grayish brown, which is pretty much a sepia color. So I'll use lighter sepias and then darker sepias as well. But for the details here, yeah, it's going to be difficult to really get in the details exactly. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of trying my best to get in the lines so that proportionately I understand where everything is located. And then I'll go in with the mineral spirit oil after a couple of layers. And then that's when I start to add detail. So I'll use lighter colors to enhance the highlights, and then use darker colors such as the black to really get more of a stricter line, more detailed lines, because that is super important. The mineral spirit oil, as you can see, blends it in a little bit too much. So you'll see here in the next minute or two how I actually change that and make it more detailed after blending all. I'd say my most favorite subject to draw are birds, because there's a huge variety of birds, and they're one of the most challenging ones for me because of these features right here. The wings are just so darn complicated, and it gives a really good challenge. So I really love that, and I love the fact that there's such a big variety of birds too. So I'm not bored just drawing the same exact species over and over again. And while we're at it, I do want to mention that if you want to learn to draw, you can also take one of my drawing classes. It's all at your own pace. You can play or pause at your leisure, and it's super heavily detailed. I also tell you the exact color pencil that I'm using. There's also a PDF download of the instructions as well as the exact color pencils I'm using and what tools I'm using as well. So if you're interested, feel free to check out the link down in the description below. And then I also have more in-depth programs on my website as well if you go to Learn to Draw at the top. But now you can see that the black is really enhancing these details a whole lot more. So the first couple of layers, you don't need to worry about the details themselves. It's just more about kind of getting the proportions down, not necessarily the details, and then focus on the details once you have a couple of layers built up. So blending the colors, I guess it's really more of the first couple layers is thinking about the colors themselves and then thinking about the proportions too, but not the details, not just yet. So moving on to the belly, you can see that I started out with a burnt orange and then worked on a dark sepia color and then just mixed a variety of orange colors. I always tell my students, if you have at the very least a set of 5 color pencils for your portrait, then you should be set, but you definitely want to have more than 5 color pencils for a portrait, because the more variety of colors that you have, even if they are similar colors, like different variety of orange colors, the more realistic your portrait is going to look. And I know a lot of people say, hey, just keep it simple, stick to a basic set of color pencils. I said the opposite, because you want to challenge yourself using a variety of different colors. I think color theory is a totally crazy thing that I don't even really understand, but I have trained myself over the years to understand color theory with color pencils specifically, and understand that if I'm going to use things like purples and greens in my portraits, it's going to help it become more realistic and more enhanced, because there actually are those crazy looking colors in that portrait itself. And if you haven't noticed by now, I don't know if you've watched my videos or if you're new here, but I'm very basic when it comes to speaking about colors and techniques and all of that. I'm a very simple worded person. I'm not very complex. So that's why I like to be able to explain to a variety of people that can understand what I'm saying here. Okay, and then you see here I'm using an electric eraser. This is very fun and very important to use. You don't have to use it for every portrait, but I really like using it to kind of create some little highlighted features like I just did here. You could still go back over it too if it looks a little bit too textured or too much like it looks like you just erased it. But you can see that it does add a lot more detail. You can also use a slice tool, which is just a little etching. Kind of looks like an X-Acto knife. But you can use that as long as you have built up enough layers and have done it properly. It doesn't always work efficiently, and I don't always like using it, but in some cases I will for really fine details. Another important thing to remember is to try to keep the same colors that you've picked out originally consistent throughout the rest of the portrait. You don't want to start out with a set of color pencils and be like, hey, I don't really like those colors, so I'm going to just completely get rid of those and pick out different colors for the rest of the portrait. That's going to really destroy your whole portrait because you're not being consistent. It does not look good. So if you draw on the left-hand side with one set of color pencils and on the right-hand side a completely different set, just try it out. You'll see for yourself. It's not a good idea. What's really nice is that right here you can actually see where the lighting is coming from. There are some portraits that it is hard to tell where the lighting is originally coming from, so it's hard to see, okay, where are my shadows supposed to be at? But here you can see underneath the wing there's quite a bit of shading happening, and you want to build that up kind of after you've created some of those colors already. What that does is it kind of makes that shadow look more realistic than if you just had started with it and then added the colors. There's something about color pencils that you want to be able to kind of blend it first with the original colors and then add the shading in a little bit afterwards. As we move into the rest of this portrait, so this is a piece of wood, and wood is actually not complicated at all, and it's pretty fun because there's all sorts of different details and textures, and it'll look like crap until you start adding the details. So just have fun with it. Focus on the shading, where the lighting is coming from, and work on the highlights, midtones, and lowlights. So when it comes to highlights, you definitely want to leave room for it. Don't think that you can just go back over it with a lighter color pencil and that will create a highlight. It's not like paint, so be mindful of that. Leave room for it, and then you can still go back over it with a lighter color pencil, such as a white color pencil, or even use an eraser. But if you start to add pigmentation to it, you already know that it's going to be way more difficult to create a sense of a highlight because you cannot necessarily completely erase something like that, and you cannot use a white color pencil to lighten it as much as you really want to. So just be mindful of that in the future. I'll tell you what though, that oil is fantastic. I mean, just watching that whole thing was really satisfying to me. I get satisfied every time I use mineral spirit oil. So you could see that after using that oil, you can add more detail on top of it, and it actually feels very buttery smooth afterwards. So it's almost like removing the texture of the paper itself, and it makes it a lot easier to add more detail after you've done that. So I highly advise getting some mineral spirit oil. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get it at any local art store. It's actually for pastels, but I really like using it for color pencils. There's a lot of materials that are actually for pastels that I kind of end up using for color pencils. But see now, look, I used that eraser and it created a sense of highlight, Whereas if I were to have left those areas completely dark, it would have been way harder to be able to erase that section and create a more of a contrast look. So we're almost done here, and I just absolutely love how this has turned out, and I think it's one of my most popular ones to watch me draw. Not necessarily to purchase as an art print, but it was very fun, and I really like using this one as a wallpaper on my phone too, because it is a vertical picture, so it's really easy to set up as that. But I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.